The medical station aboard the starship Stellar Arc buzzed with activity. Its walls were lined with sterile white panels, while the soft hum of machines filled the air. Staff moved quickly between patients, tending to soldiers who had been injured, in a skirmish on the edge of the galaxy. In the midst of all this chaos, Selena moved with focused determination. She was a new nurse on board, having just finished her training in the alien medical sciences. Today was her first shift in the emergency ward, and despite the rush, she couldn't hide the small thrill that ran through her as she worked. Her first patient was unlike any she had ever seen. A human male, lying unconscious on one of the medbay beds. His chestnut hair was matted with dirt, and a light stubble ran along his chiseled jaw. His pale skin was streaked with bruises from the battle, and his body seemed smaller in comparison to the towering, powerful beings that made up the bulk of the crew. Selena couldn't help but marvel at the human's appearance. His features were strikingly different from the alien races she was used to. The softness of his face, the color of his eyes, it all intrigued her. As she approached the patient, she noticed a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring in her chest. It wasn't just professional curiosity. There was something about this human that she couldn't quite explain. She cleared her throat, focusing on the task at hand. "What's this one's status?" she asked, glancing at the patient's chart. The lead doctor, Dr. Malik, looked up from his console. He was a tall and imposing figure, a veteran of countless battles and medical procedures. "Stable condition," he said. "But he took a nasty blow to the head. He'll likely be out for a while. Standard protocol for a sponge bath should be followed." Selena nodded, a little surprised. The patient had suffered a blow to the head in battle, yet he appeared so fragile. Her curiosity deepened. She had been trained in alien medical practices, but humans were still a novelty. Many races in the galaxy knew little about their biology, and she was eager to understand more. With a deep breath, she set to work. She filled a basin with warm, soapy water and began the process of gently cleansing the human's body. He was unresponsive, his breathing steady but shallow. As her hands worked, Selena found herself drawn to his physique. She had always been taught to respect personal boundaries, but she couldn't help but admire the way his muscles rippled beneath his skin. His chest, his arms, his legs. They were so different from her own species, whose bodies were leaner and less defined. She couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to be held by him, to feel his strength. Selena shook her head quickly, trying to banish the thoughts from her mind. "Focus," she told herself. "You're here to do your job." With steady hands, she continued her work, making sure to be as gentle as possible, mindful of the bruises that marked his body. She worked her way down his torso, over his arms and legs, careful to avoid causing him any discomfort. It was a task that, while routine, helped her focus. The human's strange anatomy fascinated her, and she found herself wondering what else she might learn as she continued her studies. Then, as she moved lower, she froze. She had just reached his legs when she noticed something that caused her heart to race. Between his legs, something was changing. There was a swelling, a strange, rapid growth that she had never seen before in her studies. She pulled back in shock, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is this?" she thought, panic beginning to set in. This couldn't be right. It wasn't like any injury or illness she had ever encountered. Could it be a sign of something worse? She had read about many alien diseases and ailments, but this was something new. Something strange. "Doctor!" Selena cried out, her voice rising in urgency. "Come quickly, I think he's coding." The lead doctor, Dr. Malik, rushed over, his footsteps heavy as he entered the room. He took one look at the human's condition, and to Selena's utter disbelief, he burst out laughing. "What's going on?" she asked, confused and still panicked. Dr. Malik waved his hand dismissively, still chuckling. "Oh, honey, this isn't a code. This," he said, gesturing at the swelling, "is just his little soldier standing at attention." Selena stared at him in confusion, her face flushed with embarrassment. "What do you mean? Is it not a sign of a serious medical condition?" The older nurse, Lila, who had been watching the exchange, laughed softly, wiping away mirthful tears from her eyes. No, sweetie. This is perfectly normal. Human males have these responses. Quite impressive, actually. It's just biology. Selina blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. She was mortified. She had been so sure that something had gone terribly wrong, but it turned out it was just a natural part of human biology. As she realized the truth, a bright purple blush spread across her cheeks. She had never been so embarrassed in her life. I see, she stammered, quickly turning back to her task, determined to finish the sponge bath without further incident. Her mind raced with the new knowledge she had gained, and she couldn't help but feel a little more embarrassed with every moment she spent near the human's body. The rest of the medical staff could hardly contain their laughter as Selina hurriedly finished the bath. She focused entirely on the task at hand, trying to ignore the whispers and knowing looks that passed between the others. She couldn't believe what had just happened. It felt like an absurd dream, and yet, it was all too real. After she finished the bath, Selina stepped back, her hands trembling slightly. She felt her embarrassment begin to fade, replaced by a sense of awe and curiosity. The human male's body was so complex, so different from her own kind. She found herself wanting to learn more about him, to understand the mysteries of human biology that were still so unknown to her. As she left the medbay, the laughter still ringing in her ears, she couldn't help but wonder, what else was there to learn about humans? And why did she feel so drawn to this one patient in particular? Selina couldn't shake the thought. She knew she would have to see him again tomorrow, and despite the awkwardness, a part of her looked forward to it. Days passed, and Selina found herself gravitating back to the medbay for every shift. Despite the embarrassment of the previous incident, there was something about Liam, the human soldier, that kept her coming back. She couldn't quite explain it, but a pull deep within her made her volunteer to oversee his recovery. As she moved through her duties with other patients, her mind often wandered back to the mysterious human. She was fascinated by the way his body healed, the way his muscles responded to the gentle exercises she helped him with, and even the strange warmth she felt each time she touched him. It wasn't just the physical aspect of her care for him, it was something more. His human eyes, though still clouded with confusion and delirium from his head injury, held a certain depth that she hadn't seen in many of her own kind. And when he awoke from his sleep, his gaze seemed to pierce right through her, locking onto hers with an intensity that left her breathless. One evening, after a particularly strenuous physical therapy session, Liam stirred. His eyes fluttered open, blinking against the bright light of the medbay. Selina stood at his bedside, adjusting his pillow and trying to give him space to regain his bearings. When his gaze met hers, her heart skipped a beat. There was a moment of stillness between them, as if the world had slowed down just for a second. "Where am I?" Liam's voice was raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken in days. His lips parted slowly, as if the effort of speaking was exhausting, but his eyes never left Selina's. "You're safe," Selina replied, her voice soft and comforting. She brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, trying to keep her composure despite the flurry of emotions swirling inside her. "You were injured in a battle. We've been caring for you since you were brought in." Liam gave her a weak but genuine smile. His face lit up with a warmth that Selina couldn't ignore. "I must have died and gone to heaven," he murmured. "Because I'm looking at an angel." Selina's heart skipped a beat. Was he delirious from the injury? Was it a compliment or just a product of his confused state? She wasn't sure, but it made her blush anyway. The warmth of his gaze, his words, no matter how weak they seemed, touched something inside her. She couldn't deny that her feelings for him were starting to change. Just then, the lead doctor, Dr. Malik, entered the room, his usual stern expression breaking into a grin as he saw the exchange between them. Well, Dr. Malik said with a chuckle. "Sergeant Wilde, glad to see you've rejoined the land of the living." He paused, looking at Selina, a teasing glint in his eyes. "You gave us quite the scare, especially poor Selina here. She thought your Morning glory was a sign you were knocking on death's door. Selina's face turned a deep shade of purple. She shot Dr. Malik a glare, but he just winked at her, clearly enjoying the moment. Liam, still in a daze, let out a hearty laugh. "Ah, that's something I'll never forget," Liam said, his voice now steadier. His eyes were still on Selina, but now there was a new light in them, a flicker of recognition, an understanding that was beginning to form. "Thank you, nurse. I guess you saved me twice today," Selina swallowed, trying to steady her racing heart. "It's part of my job, Sergeant," she replied, forcing a professional smile. But even as she said it, her body betrayed her. Her pulse raced and she could feel the heat creeping up her neck. Over the next few days, Selina continued to care for Liam, watching him recover with a sense of pride. She spent hours helping him with physical therapy, guiding him through stretches and strengthening exercises to help him regain his mobility. Each time their hands brushed, Selina felt a jolt of electricity run through her, and every time Liam made a joke or gave her a flirty smile, her resolve to remain professional grew weaker. It was during one of these sessions, as she helped Liam stretch his arms, that their connection deepened. She had her hands on his shoulders, adjusting his posture, when Liam's voice broke the silence. "You know," he said, his voice low and playful, "I've been thinking I might need some extra special care after all this therapy. I'm really starting to feel the burn, nurse." Selina, trying to remain professional, cleared her throat and pulled her hands back. "You're doing fine, Sergeant. Just keep up with the stretches, and you'll be back to full strength in no time." But Liam wasn't satisfied. He raised an eyebrow and grinned. "Well, if you're offering extra care, I wouldn't say no. You've been working me pretty hard, nurse. Maybe I need something more personal?" Selina's breath caught in her throat. She quickly turned away, trying to mask the warmth in her cheeks. She wasn't sure if it was the playful teasing or the undeniable chemistry between them that left her so flustered. All she knew was that being near Liam, helping him, and watching him recover had become an unexpected source of exhilaration. It was a dangerous feeling, one that could ruin everything she had worked for. But there was no denying it. She was starting to care for him. More than just as a patient, more than just as a man who needed her help. Her heart was beginning to beat faster whenever he was around, and she couldn't ignore the growing attraction that she had to fight with every session. And yet, despite the growing bond between them, Selina knew there were lines she could not cross. She was a nurse. He was a patient. There were rules that governed their interactions, rules she had been trained to follow. But those rules felt less important when she was with him. Selina would tell herself that it was just a fleeting attraction, that it would pass once Liam was fully recovered. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Something more had taken root inside her. And no matter how hard she tried to deny it, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life on the stellar arc had just become far more complicated and far more exciting than she could have ever imagined. As Liam continued his recovery, Selina knew that her days of simply following orders and performing her duties were numbered. She was drawn to him, and no amount of professional distance could change that. The question now was, what would she do about it? The days went by in a blur of physical therapy sessions, medical checks, and the usual routine. Yet for Selina, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The tension between her and Liam was palpable, growing stronger with each interaction. Their playful banter had transformed into something deeper, more meaningful, and despite the professional boundaries they both knew should remain, there was an undeniable pull between them. Liam's recovery was progressing well. His muscles were gaining strength, and he had stopped relying on the support Selina provided during their exercises. However, their sessions had become something else entirely. What had begun as strictly professional help was now laced with flirtation and stolen moments of lingering touches. One afternoon, during a particularly intense therapy session, Selina had Liam stretch his legs as part of his mobility training. She knelt beside him, adjusting the position of his leg as she gently pressed it forward. His body was taut with effort, his breath coming in steady rhythm. Every time she touched him, every time her fingers brushed against his skin, She felt a jolt of electricity run through her. It was becoming harder to maintain control, harder to ignore the growing attraction that was threatening to overwhelm her. Liam, sensing the change in her demeanor, couldn't help but tease her. "You know, nurse, I'm starting to think you're enjoying this more than I am," he said with a smirk, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're making me work pretty hard, but I'm not sure my muscles are the only thing that's getting a workout." Selina's heart skipped a beat. She quickly pulled away, trying to regain her composure. "Focus on the exercises, Sergeant," she said, her voice shaky. "You're doing great, keep it up." But Liam's teasing didn't stop there. He could see how she struggled to maintain her professionalism, and it seemed to only encourage him more. With every stretch, every movement, he became more playful, more daring with his comments. Each time he made a joke or shot her a flirtatious smile, Selina found herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. The space between them seemed to shrink, and the lines she had drawn between herself and him began to blur. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Liam caught her by surprise. He had been getting more confident in his interactions with Selina, and that night, as she helped him stand from the mat, he suddenly grabbed her wrist. The movement was quick, but it was enough to stop her in her tracks. Selina looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Sergeant, what are you doing?" Liam's grin was lopsided, full of mischief. "I think you've been working me hard enough, nurse. How about we take a break from the exercises and just relax for a moment?" His voice was low and inviting, the playful glint in his eyes betraying his true intentions. Selina's pulse raced. She had never expected him to be so forward, so bold. But the way he looked at her, the way his hand still held her wrist gently, made her heart race. She felt her resistance begin to crumble. "This is wrong," she told herself. But the feeling of being wanted, of being desired, was something she had never felt so strongly before. I don't think this is a good idea," Selina said, pulling her wrist gently from his grip. "You're my patient. We can't cross that line." But Liam didn't let go. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming her. "Selina," he said, softly, his voice almost a whisper. "I don't want to be just your patient anymore. I don't want to pretend this connection between us doesn't exist." His hand brushed a lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her skin. "I can't stop thinking about you. I don't think I ever will." Selina took a step back, her breath shallow. She felt a whirlwind of emotions spinning inside her, each one fighting for dominance. "He's right," she thought. "There's something between us. Something I can't ignore." But she knew the consequences of acting on those feelings. The station's rules were clear. A nurse had no business becoming romantically involved with a patient, let alone one in the middle of recovery. She could lose everything: her job, her career, and worse, the respect she had earned from her colleagues. "I can't, Liam," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm your nurse. I have a responsibility to you, to your recovery." Liam's expression softened, and he stepped back, giving her some space. "I understand," he said, his voice laced with regret. "I just needed to know if you felt the same way." Selina's heart ached as she watched him retreat. She had never imagined this situation would become so complicated. She had never planned for her feelings to get in the way of her duties. But in that moment she realized that despite her attempts to stay professional, she had already crossed the line. She cared for him in ways she couldn't deny, and that truth was impossible to ignore. Over the next few days, Selina found herself more conflicted than ever. She couldn't shake the memory of Liam's words, the tenderness in his gaze. She could feel him pulling her closer, yet the professional barriers still stood between them. Every time they interacted, her heart raced, and she found it increasingly difficult to focus on her duties. Liam, for his part, seemed to understand the tension between them. He was patient, never pushing her too far, but his flirtations continued. He'd send her sly smiles across the room, or casually drop a comment that left her blushing. She could feel the weight of his desire, and despite her attempts to resist, she found herself reciprocating, unable to push him away. As Selina struggled with her emotions, her colleagues began to notice the change in her demeanor. Lyra, the senior nurse who had seen countless patients come and go, raised an eyebrow one evening as Selina passed by her in the hallway. "You've been spending a lot of time with that human soldier," Lyra said, her tone casual but sharp. "He's an interesting one, isn't he?" Selina froze, feeling a surge of panic. "What do you mean?" Lyra smiled knowingly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I can tell when a nurse is getting too attached. Just be careful, Selina. The station doesn't look kindly on relationships between staff and patients, and it could be dangerous for you." Selina felt her stomach drop. She knew what Lyra was hinting at. Everyone on this ship is watching me, she thought. I can't afford to mess this up. But even as she tried to push her feelings down, she couldn't shake the pull she felt towards Liam. The attraction, the bond, it was undeniable. And as she looked at him across the room, her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, her professional boundaries had already been crossed. The question was no longer if they would cross the line, but when Selina's mind swirled as she walked through the halls of the stellar arc, her heart weighed down by the growing tension between duty and desire. Every glance toward Liam now felt charged with unspoken words, and she could sense that he was just as restless as she was. The pull between them was undeniable, a magnetic force that neither of them seemed capable of resisting, yet they both knew the stakes. If they crossed the line, everything could unravel. But every time Selina entered Liam's quarters to assist with his recovery, it became harder to ignore the growing attraction between them. Liam had begun to show signs of improvement. His muscles were regaining strength, and his mental clarity returned with each passing day. However, his playful teasing had only intensified. Every time Selina helped him with his exercises, he would make casual comments about how hands-on her care had been. His eyes lingered on her in a way that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. The innocent touches that once seemed like nothing more than professional gestures now felt laden with meaning. One day, after a particularly exhausting round of physical therapy, Selina found herself alone with Liam in his room. He was sitting up in bed, his chest heaving with effort after their workout. He smiled at her as she entered, the warmth in his eyes making her pulse quicken. "Selina," Liam said, his voice low and steady. "I know we've both been trying to keep things professional, but this is getting harder, don't you think?" He shifted in his bed, leaning forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. Selina's heart raced, and for a moment she struggled to find her voice. I don't know what you mean," she stammered, though her thoughts were all over the place. Liam's smile widened and he let out a soft laugh. "Come on, Selina. We both know there's something here. Something that goes beyond the nurse-patient relationship. You can't keep pretending like it doesn't exist." The words struck her like a bolt of lightning. She had tried to ignore it, to keep it buried beneath layers of professionalism and logic. But here Liam was, laying it all out in front of her, as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. It was a vulnerability she hadn't expected, and it took her by surprise. "I don't know what to do, Liam," she whispered, taking a hesitant step closer. "I'm your nurse. I'm supposed to care for you and keep things professional. If I let this thing between us continue, it could ruin everything. My career, my reputation, your recovery." She bit her lip, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "But I can't deny that I feel something for you too." Liam reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. "Then don't deny it, Selina. We're only human. We can't control everything, and sometimes feelings happen when we least expect them. This connection, this chemistry, is real. And I know it's hard, but maybe it's worth the risk." Selina's breath caught in her throat. She felt her resolve begin to crack, but the weight of her duties as a nurse, as a professional, pulled her back. "I can't," she whispered, stepping back. "This isn't the right time. There's too much at stake." Liam's eyes darkened with frustration. He sat up straighter, his hand falling to his side. "You're not the only one who's scared, Selina," he said, his voice strained. "I've never felt anything like this before, and every day I spend with you it gets harder to pretend that I don't want something more." The intensity in his gaze left her breathless, and for a moment, Selina felt herself weaken. Why was this so difficult? Why couldn't she simply let go of the rules, of the fears, and give in to what she truly wanted? But then the harsh reality of their situation flooded her thoughts again. She couldn't cross that line. She couldn't let herself get lost in a relationship that could tear apart everything she had worked for. "I need to go," Selina said, her voice shaky as she turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "I can't do this." As she exited the room, she felt a pang of regret twist in her chest. But she held firm. "No matter what I feel, I can't let this happen." Days passed, but the tension between them only grew. Selina continued to help Liam with his recovery, but the underlying connection between them became impossible to ignore. He'd catch her staring at him during their sessions, his knowing smile telling her that he was fully aware of the attraction that simmered just beneath the surface, and the worst part was she couldn't hide her feelings anymore. Every glance, every lingering touch seemed to pull her closer to him. But just as things were reaching a boiling point, disaster struck. It was a typical day in the medbay when Dr. Malik pulled Selina aside, his expression grim. "Selina," he began, his voice low, "I've been watching your interactions with Sergeant Wilde, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to report it to the board." Selina's stomach dropped, her breath catching in her throat. She had feared this moment, and now it had arrived. She had been so careful, so professional, or so she had thought. But somewhere, in the heat of their shared moments, she had crossed a line that could cost her everything. "What are you talking about, Dr. Malik?" Selina asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's nothing going on. I'm just doing my job." Dr. Malik shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "I've seen the way you look at him, the way he looks at you. It's not professional. I'm afraid I'll have no choice but to report this." The weight of the situation hit Selina like a ton of bricks. She felt trapped, cornered by her own emotions. How had she let it go this far? How had she let herself fall for someone who was not only her patient, but also someone she knew she could never have? "I don't want to lose my job, Dr. Malik," Selina said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll end this. I'll keep my distance. Just please, don't report it." But Dr. Malik didn't respond. He simply walked away, leaving Selina alone with her thoughts. That night, Selina couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, the guilt eating away at her. The thought of losing her job, of being cast aside for something she had no control over, haunted her. And the worst part? She still couldn't shake the pull toward Liam. It was a storm she couldn't escape, a whirlwind of emotions that had taken root deep inside her. She knew that something had to change. And the next day, it did. The following morning, as Selina walked into the medbay, she found herself standing in front of Liam's room, her hand hovering over the door handle. She could feel her heart racing, her mind screaming at her to turn away. But she couldn't. She was done fighting it. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. This time there would be no running, no more pretending.